This is Paul Schneiderman today on the 143rd edition of the Sports Untold podcast, also on RainierAvenueRadio.world. And my special guest today is University of Washington football legend Mark Bruener. Mark also had a 14-year distinguished professional football career. Mark, I'll get back to you in a minute. My podcast is now on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Google, iTunes, Podbean. You can go to sportsuntoldpodcast.net to listen to some of my shows. And you can also go by just clicking Sports Untold YouTube, and you can watch some of the video versions of my show. My producer, Olivia Coyne's doing a great job. Known Olivia's family for years. Olivia's been with me for, 6 or 7 months now. All right, Mark, back to you. Mark Bruener, as I mentioned, is University of Washington Husky football legend. Mark was known as a great blocking tight end, although he caught a good chunk of passes too in his NFL and college careers. Mark was a All-American in 1993. Mark was a first-round pick in the 95 NFL draft. Mark played, 9 years for the Steelers and 5 for the Houston Texans? Okay, I hope I got that right. Mark's currently a scout for the Steelers, which we'll talk about. And I haven't seen Mark in years, but we were friends in the college fraternity, University of Washington, Lambda Chi Alpha House. And Mark was very well-liked and a very well-liked guy. And just a little fun story I'll tell, Mark. There are a bunch of guys, you probably don't remember this, Mark, a bunch of guys in the lunchroom were asking questions about the Huskies and football and just pounding you about everything. And I was definitely participating and drilling you with some questions. And Mark just said, "Hey guys, let's take a break. I don't know what you're up to, Paul. What are you up to?" You just I'll never forget that. You just sort of being the nice guy you are. You just sort of said, "Hey, let's take a break. Let's talk about you guys for a minute." So I always got a kick out of the way you handled a bunch of fans asking you lots of Husky football questions and stuff. So, well, Mark, it's been a long time, and it's great to have you come on Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Radio.
I appreciate you having me on, Paul. I really do, and I know you've had some of my teammates on in the weeks past, and very exciting. And for me to be able to come on your show this week, I'm just extremely excited about it. And we get to talk about what I love to do and what's been a part of my life for a lot of years, and that's football. And
Absolutely.
that to me, I could talk forever on. And you bring up some great memories of the Lambda Chi house and some of our dearest friends. The friendships were started back then, and for those to continue on now, several years later. I say several because you really tell how old you are when you say, "Oh, 25 years later or 30 years later." So I just say several years. That way, it doesn't put us in the box as far as how old we really are.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say I'm 33 years old, Mark.
There you go. I like that. I like the way you think. Yeah.
Well, Mark, as you mentioned a minute ago, football's been such a big part of your life. Talk about how you got the football bug growing up in Aberdeen, Washington, and tell us about what resulted in your decision to attend the University of Washington. What was your second choice of the schools you recruited by? But start with just how you got the bug as a kid growing up in Aberdeen.
So I played multiple sports growing up, and that was one of the things my parents encouraged all the kids to do is to try different sports. My first year of contact football wasn't until 7th grade, junior high. It wasn't offered back then. It was flag football at the little Catholic school that I went to, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed basketball. Basketball was really my first love. I really enjoyed football, but basketball, I thought I was going to be an NBA player. Well, then I reached my vertical potential early and topped out at 6'4", and I realized that I didn't have the ball handling skills to be a point guard because that's about the size of the true professional point guards. And I said, all right, well, a 6'4" post is not going to work, and continued to have my love and affinity towards football, and was fortunate enough to receive some scholarship offers. And I'll never forget, I received my first recruiting letter. I was sitting in my math class, geometry class, and Mr. Waite was the teacher, and it was from the University of Notre Dame. And it was just one of those just generic, I mean, they probably sent out thousands of them, but for me, it was like the coolest thing in the world. Fill out all your personal information. And, we all cheated on this, but, your height, your weight, your bench press, and your 40. I mean, I think I had a 400-pound bench press back then as a sophomore in high school, which really, come on, nobody does that. So that was something that I know that will always stick with me. And my senior years when the recruiting visit started, my parents were extremely involved and supportive throughout that. My first recruiting trip ever was to University of Notre Dame. Lou Holtz was the coach. Had a great experience back there, but for me, it was too far away. There in Illinois, South Bend, Indiana, I just said, it's a little too far, and had some other opportunities on the West Coast. Stanford was Denny Green was the coach there at Stanford at the time, and my parents really wanted me to go to Stanford. My mom, in particular, there on the visit, was obviously being the great mom that she is. And, every time she had a chance to say, go Stanford, she was saying it. So we introduced my parents at one of the events we were at. And my dad, hey, I'm Fred Bruener. I'm Mark Bruener's dad, and go Huskies. And you want to talk about some Stanford alumni turning around going, what in the heck's going on here? Like it was almost pandemonium, but it was all in good spirit, all good fun. I get home from that recruiting trip, and Stanford is written on my pillowcase in red marker from my mom. Like she really wanted me to dream about going to Stanford. And then when I committed to the University of Washington, she didn't talk to me for 3 days. She said that I made the mistake of my life, and how could I do that? And for a minute there, I was second guessing myself. But Randy Hart, who is still a great friend of mine today, was the gentleman that recruited me there. Don James was the head coach, and they had numerous head coaches or coaches, excuse me, that I grew, fond of, and the whole atmosphere, being close to home, just the culture there that Coach James had at the University of Washington to me was exceptional amongst of any of the schools that I went to. Now there was great culture at Stanford. I want to be really clear. Notre Dame with Lou Holtz, great culture, but it just was that much better at Washington. And then the first game that I played in my freshman year was down at Stanford, and we beat them 42-7. So my mom and dad were in the parking lot of the game after the game, and I said, "Mom, aren't you glad I didn't go to Stanford?" And she's laughing and joking and stuff. And that was our national championship year, so that was really a dream year for us for me to be a part of, and for us to really experience. And what a way to kick off your college career, to go to a school you want, win a national title, and not lose a game.
It's funny you mentioned the Stanford connection. Greg Lewis's mom has something in common with your mom. Greg's mom really wanted him to go to Stanford too. So
well, we both have smart moms.
Lewis,
yeah. I just saw Greg coming back from the championship game. We flew on the same plane, and it's so nice that he's still involved and does the radio and with Coach Baird. And I really enjoy him, and I think he does an outstanding job with his role there with the game day broadcast that he's a part of.
Greg's been on my show. He's a personal friend as well, a great guy. One other thing, Mark, you mentioned being 6'4". Charles Barkley was a good 6'4" big man kind of player, though.
Good point. But for some reason, I think he wasn't his nickname the round rebound or something along those lines. Yeah, like he had a kind of a larger girth than a lot of people, and a much bigger backside. So when he wanted to box out some of those other players, they didn't really have a lot of room to get around him, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I bet you could hold your own basketball, Mark. Mark, you had so many great moments at University of Washington, and I want to ask about your favorite moment as a Husky player. Was it that famous catch you made in that Rose Bowl game?
That was definitely a highlight. I mean, there's so many great things that came from that. Here I'm a freshman. I'm playing in the national or I didn't know at the time it was a national championship game because we shared things back then, as far as the AP and the coaches. It was a pivotal moment in the game. We were able to get up with that and then never look back. 34-14, I think, was the final score. And there's been numerous times where that play has come up, and it's been a pretty amazing thing. Prime example, we're there with my family watching the Huskies play Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, and we're sitting, really good seats there behind the bench. And they showed that replay. They show the replays during the games, historical catches and things. Well, the guy behind us goes, "Man, that'd be so cool to meet that guy." And my son Carson turns back and he goes, "Do you want to meet him?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, what are you talking about?" And he goes, "Hey, Dad, this guy wants to meet you." And I turn around and I shake his hand. And it was like, to see the expression on his face. I mean, he's a diehard Husky fan. And, for me, I'm so honored that this guy would actually, be excited to meet me and be with my family. But it was all because of that one play. And that's just exciting. It really is, and it's special, and it resonates with our family significantly.
For some of the listeners and viewers who may not remember or be aware of Mark's catch, it was a very you utilize it was a catch where Mark utilized amazing footwork to stay in the end zone towards the back of the end zone. Is that a bad way to describe it? So
It was kind of a drag route. Bill Joe Holbert was the quarterback, and they referred to it as tiptoeing along the end line because I literally was the first two steps. I was literally tiptoeing to make sure I was in bounds. So it
yeah,
was.
no,
They say, Paul, it's a game of inches, and that definitely is an example of a game of inches.
no doubt. I should have put up a video of that play as part of like a like a lot of the big networks have the videos when they're my podcast is more basic, but I should put up a video of that. So
Yeah.
Mark, so many amazing Husky football players. I asked Eric Bjorns this question, a couple other Husky football players. Who's your favorite Husky football player in history?
Oh gosh, that's really tough to tell. I'll give you some that I've always enjoyed.
Yeah,
Some of my favorite teammates that I played with: Napoleon Kaufman, Ernie Conwell, Damon Heward, Eric Bjornson. And I'm not saying that because he was recently on your show. I'm saying that because he was a good friend. Donald Jones, Donovan Schmidt, Leif Johnson, Dana Hall, Walter Bailey, Steve Etman, Dave Hoffman, James Clifford. Um, uh, players that I revered, as a kid growing up, the Paul Scanzies, the Kerry Conklins, uh, um, Donald Jones.
so many.
After I've left, like some of the players that have really, really impressed me, the Buda Bakers, the Sidney Joneses, the Danny Sheltons, Vita Veas, Jake Lockhart. And I know I'm leaving out a bunch, and I apologize. There was no ill will with this, but like, there's just so many great players, and we recently had a recruiting weekend with Coach Fish, the new head coach, and they had several of us alumni that were there, and Mario Bailey, Lawyer Malloy, and we were asked to talk to the group about what Husky football means to us, and everybody had different comments to say, but the common theme was how special it was to develop the relationships of the players that we had in the locker room at the time when we played. There's 115 guys, 120 guys, and you develop a really tight bond with them because you experience a lot of things and you deal with adversity, so many emotional things that you deal with. But one of the common things that we had amongst everybody that was speaking is to this day, even though it's been 15, 20, 30 years for some of us, we're still really close and we still care about each other. And that bond that you make is a lifetime bond as a Husky player. And now that I have two sons that are on the team and a part of this, I'm like so excited that they get to experience that type of bond with their teammates that I have to this day right now. So it's pretty special.
You want to go way back, Mark. The late Hugh McElhaney was a great Husky. There's just so many.
Yeah. Ray Penny, the center. I know it's not a sexy position, but offensive center, and he was actually a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Right.
Paul Scanzi is a dear friend of mine, and he scouts for the Washington Commanders. And I still talk about watching him play, not only as a Husky, but then as a Seattle Seahawk. And he, again, was drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I know I'm just kind of weird that both those guys were,
but from Gig Harbor, right?
Yeah, Gig Harbor. Exactly.
Right,
exactly.
Right. I remember watching him growing up.
Yeah.
So I've talked to Don James is probably one name that's come up a lot on my podcasts with Seattle-based podcasts, and Don James's name comes up a lot. I can ask you so many questions about Don James. So why don't you just kind of share a memory of Don James? And did you find Don James intimidating? That's kind of the vibe I get from some of the people I've interviewed about Don James.
100% intimidating.
Okay.
100%. But the thing about Coach James was it wasn't like he was like this big and massive, impressive stature of a human being. Like, what was impressive to me was his confidence and his ability to relate to everybody. And what am I saying by relate to everybody? Is he had a different way he went about it. And he coached if I was making a mistake on the practice field or in the game, he would coach the coach to say, you got to get Bruener right. He wouldn't yell at me. He would be, stern with the position coach. And while I was going through it, we were deathly afraid of really stirring the pot in any way, shape, or form. The meeting started at 11 o'clock. Well, there was real time and there was DJ time. And Coach James' time was always 15 minutes early. So while you're going through it, you're a 20, 21-year-old college kid, and you're like, man, this guy's got all these blasted rules. I can't believe it. It's terrible. Like, why do I got to be in my seat at 15 minutes early? Like, thinking the world's going to end, and why is he so difficult? So we would be in team meetings, and um, we'd all be sitting there at 15 minutes early. And if the door would open and a player would come in like 10 minutes early, still ample time to be in a seat, we would all look at him like, what the heck are you doing, man? Like, you get your seat. Like, don't be doing that. So, like, those things that he instilled in us were lifelong lessons and lifelong things. And like, I try to be early when I'm there, and it's not always practical, but we would joke. And I talked about the relationship that the players had, here it is 20 years later. Well, we still talk about DJ time and how we would always be, in our chairs early. And those are some of the fond memories. And, after my playing days, I remember I was at Steve Sarkisian had a golf tournament at Suncadia. And this is when Coach James was still alive, and my wife and I were there. We were going in the elevator. I see Coach James and Carol, his wife. And Carol was like the sweetest lady in the world. Like, she knew all the players and was endearing to everybody. And Coach James walks in the elevator, and I said, "Hey, Coach, how you doing?" I said, "I'm." And as soon as I said I was going to say Mark Bruener, because it's been a lot of years, he goes, "Mark, how you doing?" He said, "Have you been back to Aberdeen to see your folks lately?" And I'm just like, man, this has been like 15 years, maybe more, since I've seen this guy. And immediately he's got my name, where I'm from. And that, to me, is of the hundreds of athletes or thousands of athletes that he's been around from Kent State all the way to Washington. That's extremely impressive. Those are,
Did you
again,
find
yeah.
Don James a little more like approachable after you played for him in some ways?
100%. 100%. And I don't know if it was me or if it was him, that I just felt like he was more approachable.
Love it.
Yeah.
He was a famous coach, very successful coach, Don James.
Yeah.
Mark, you were the number 27 pick in the 95 NFL draft. Really cool. You were a first round draft pick. Tell us about getting the call that you were picked in the first round by the Pittsburgh Steelers. It wasn't expected. Did you see yourself being picked by the Steelers?
Well, that was in 1995, and that's when the draft was different. It was only 2 days. They didn't, do the big red carpet event, where guys are in suits and they change colors and all that stuff. So I was at my parents' house in Westport, and I remember getting the call. And we were watching the draft, and just as the 27th pick came up, because the commissioner gets up and says, "Hey, the 26th picks, the Carolina Panthers select, so and so. Now the Steelers are on the clock." And as soon as they said Steelers are on the clock, the phone rang. And, "Hey, is this Mark?" "Yeah, this is Mark. How you doing?" "Hold on." And I'm like, "Okay, well, first of all, who is this? And like, what's going on here?" Like, I'm trying to watch the draft, and I'm trying to see if I'm going to get picked here. And like, it was like, oh my gosh. So I'm watching the ticker go by, and then the commissioner gets on and says, "Hey, with the 27th pick, Pittsburgh Steelers select Mark Bruener, tight end from University of Washington." And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then people get on the phone and say, "Hey, this is Coach Cowher. Congratulations. We're excited to get you." And, then you start going through the gamut. But that, like, 2 minutes felt like 2 hours when they say, "Hey, is this Mark?" "Yeah, this is Mark." "Okay, hold on." And they don't tell me who they are. So I have no idea. It could have been, the neighbor down the street or some Yahoo. I don't know. And this is before cell phones too. So this is a landline.
Right.
And, I don't want to be holding up the line if someone else is trying to call, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, that was exciting. Very exciting. My whole family was there, and my wife, Tracy, was there to share that experience with me. And it's so amazing just how fast time goes. And when you reflect back on it and really, cherish some of those memories and relive some of those memories, it really is a fun thing to do.
Did you get any tips the Steelers were interested in you, Mark?
They flew me back for a pre-draft interview. But then other teams did too. So it wasn't like it was unusual, like they were the only team that did that. I thought I had a good meeting back there with Coach Cowher and Tom Donahoe, the general manager at the time. But yeah, there was rumors I was going to go to the Washington Redskins at the time. There was rumors I was going to go to the Seattle Seahawks. And then, the Steelers Cleveland Browns was another one. So Kyle Brady was the first tight end chosen that year to the New York Jets at number 9. And then I was the second tight end chosen by the Steelers.
Mark, I can ask you about your first game, and feel free to share about that in the NFL. But what was it like being a kid from Aberdeen, a UW kid, and walking in to an NFL headquarters or NFL locker room the first time to meet a lot of the guys? Because there were some veteran players in the Steelers that were really well-known players. What was it like walking in for the first time, meeting a lot of the guys?
It's a whirlwind. I mean, it's overwhelming, and there's a lot of people that are in the same boat that I am, as far as like, oh my gosh, like really wide-eyed. Um, being fortunate to come from a great university like University of Washington, I think they did a really good job of preparing me from a personal standpoint. Just maturing and learning how to deal and be professional. And that was largely due to the coaches and the interaction I had with the coaches and the other staff members there. Um, and then the academic portion, Gertrude Peoples and Rob Post were the two people that I really dealt with a lot. And they made sure all of those affairs were in order. So then I could, immerse myself into that environment. Um, it was overwhelming. I mean, there was some Hall of Fame players: Rod Woodson, Greg Lloyds, Kevin Greens, Justin Strelzik, John Jackson, Neil O'Donnell. My in my draft class that year was myself, Cordell Stewart, Brendan Stye, Lethon Flowers, Dante Jones, all these people from all over the country, and here we're together working with the Steel organization. And the Rooney family are definitely as advertised as far as how genuine and amazing they are. And right away, Mr. Rooney, Dan Rooney, he was the ambassador to Obama during his term, was our president. And just the way they go about it and the way the Rooneys go about welcoming the new players to the organization, I think is unique. And the amazing thing is it's still the same way today. When new players come in, the Rooney family does it very similar to how it was with me, just being welcoming and very endearing to the family and to the players and their families as they're entering into the Pittsburgh area.
That's a real old school, respected NFL family, the Rooney ownership. So,
Yeah.
like you worked with a good franchise,
Yeah.
as a player.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I want you to kind of put on your perspective as a parent and as a UW football alum. You have two sons that play in the University of Washington football team now. What's just your take, and maybe combine those two perspectives if you want, because it could be somewhat different with Kalen DeBoer leaving and Jed Fish being hired as a new coach. Kind of put on the parent perspective and the Husky alum perspective.
Well, extremely tough. I think the college football college football has changed drastically since when I played, when you and I both were in school. And I think it's also changed drastically in the last 5 to 7 years. It's always been a money-driven, per se, sport. It's been one of the highest earning revenue sports amongst many universities. Justly so. There's a lot of attention, and I'm glad that they've made some advancements in paying the players and giving them at least a portion of the pie that's being generated as far as revenue goes. The loyalty, I think, has changed. So as a Husky alum, I was really bummed that coach left after 2 years. As a parent, both my sons were extremely disappointed. Like, wait a minute, like what happened? I'm just finally getting used to what's going on, and look what we did. Carson will have 4 head coaches in his college career there at University of Washington, and it's unusual because like when I was there, it was like Don James and Jim Owens. I mean, I'm not saying my numbers are great, but like it might have been 35 or 40 years in 2 coaches. So that's unusual to have that happen. But then with current times, as a parent, I got to tell my son, look, this is another chance for you to grow. This is another chance for you to look at this adversity that you're facing and say, you know what, I'm going to get to know a new coach. I'm going to get to know a new system. My goal is to play in the NFL. So this is actually going to make you more versatile and more appealing to what I look for as an NFL scout, because this guy's a smart kid. He can learn multiple defenses. Well, he's been forced to, and that to me is an advantage. So there's a lot of pause that I have to some degree, but then I look back at what Coach DeBoer and his staff did, and they made us nationally relevant. The last time we were in that type of a situation was yours and my freshman year at Washington in 1991. So we have to be so grateful for what he and his staff did for the University of Washington. And now the players in that locker room understand what they need to do to get back there. So that to me is something that they need to draw from. And if they didn't have this coaching staff and that experience, then they wouldn't know what really it takes to get there. So I think there's a lot of pluses that you can take from it. Disappointment, yes, but now we have a great new coach in Jed Fish. I've had a chance to interact with him, and he's shown a lot of success down there at Arizona. So let's see what he and his staff can do. There's still a lot of talent in that locker room and in that building, and I think they can utilize that in the right way, and it'll be good.
Mark, I think a lot of parents listening will appreciate hearing your parental approach to your sons. Look, this is part of growing up as a person and developing, dealing with changes. Anyhow, I'm not a parent, but it sounds like a positive way of looking at it. So,
well, we're all faced with adversity in our lives, whatever that adversity is. Sometimes it's extreme, sometimes it's not, and not everything is going to go how we want it. And I really think this the how someone reacts to adversity is really the sign of their true character. And again, I'm not wishing adversity on anybody. Let's be really clear with that. But we're all going to be faced with adversity, whatever that might be. And we see people and how they react when they're faced with some challenges, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's not the way I want to react. But for Carson to look at this as like, it's a chance for me to grow. Well, now his leadership has to step up. Now he's got to find a way to keep this team together. He's got to find a way to communicate with the new coaching staff, say, hey, what do you want us to do as far as the culture in this locker room? And then he's going to be one that's going to help implement that to the rest of his teammates. So I think there could be some positives from it. I really do.
Yeah, no, I like hearing your perspective. Mark, I'm kind of curious about you have a unique background. I mean, you're a college football American, 13 years NFL or 14 years NFL. You're an NFL scout. Just coaching, having two kids that are football players. What tell us about that? Were you the kind of parent that would step in and say, this coach needs to fix how he's doing the drills? I'm picking up on some things. Or tell us about that, Mark, because you have so much more background about football than most other parents have. Tell us your kind of philosophy of how to deal with, because your knowledge base is so good. Do you share that knowledge a lot, or are you kind of restrained about it?
Well, when the older boys were younger, I tried to be their youth coach and be as present as I could, even while I was still playing. And It wasn't because I thought I knew all the answers. It was because I wanted to be sure that they were taught the right way and safe way to play.
Sure.
And so I've never ever taken the stance of pounding my chest and saying, hey, because of my name on the back of my shirt or what I did at the time, and that I'm better than you, or I understand, or I'm more knowledgeable than you. So that means that I just get out of my way and let me take over. Like, I've never done that. I've always been, how am I going to help improve either how this coach is coaching, or how am I going to improve this experience for this young person? And I remember when we were in Houston, the coaches would basically, all right, here's the starters, and then for everybody else, you just stand over there. And so I'm watching, and I'm like, man, we got like 7 kids that are standing there like kicking the grass and doing nothing. Like, there's got to be a way we can kind of work with these guys. So I said, hey, coach, you mind if I just kind of work with some of these players? So I'm working with them a little bit. And he comes over and he goes, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm just trying to keep these kids active and get them involved and stuff.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, you got any football background? I said, yeah, I do a little bit. I played a little bit. And he's like, well, yeah, go ahead. You're doing great. And so then the next practice I show up and he's like, hey, are you going to work with those kids again? I said, yeah, if you don't mind. So I continued to do that. Why had a parent come up to me and say, I'm so appreciative of you doing that with my son, because last year all he did was stand there, right, and he didn't want to play football this year. So I was like, all right, I've done something well. I'm doing okay. And then I moved here back to Seattle after I retire. And boys, we signed them up for flag football.
Yeah.
And we're at Redmond High School, and lo and behold, my neighbor's actually the coach. So I show up, how you doing? My name is Mark. Here's my 2 sons. Anything I can do to help, please let me know. And so he's like, great, so here, we only have 7 or 8 players on the team, so it's not like it's a big deal, but I still wanted to be there for my kid. And we're going through the practice, and then we have the game. Everything goes great. Hey, thanks for letting me come. I appreciate it. So the next week I show up and he goes, hey, Sandbagger. And I said, Sandbagger, what are you talking about? And you know where I'm going here. And he goes, why didn't you tell me? So then I'm like, tell you what, buddy. And he goes, I don't know, maybe you played in the NFL. And I just said, hey, I'm just here to help out the kids, to be a part of it.
Love
So
it. Love it.
I've always taken that approach, and I followed the boys through high school, and I always stay out. I always take the stance of, unless I'm there at practice in the meeting, then I don't make an opinion on what the coach is doing or calling. And rotation, like, hey, I wish my kid would play more, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's not my place. That's the coach's place. Now, there's times, again, more learning things that I can teach my son, where a player, maybe I'm just making this up, this player comes in, he's a transfer, and he plays more than him. And he's like, Dad, what's going on? And I go, you know what? Sometimes coaches have an affinity towards a player, and there's nothing you can do about it. No matter how great you play, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
If that player just kind of, coach loves him, that's just kind of the way it's going to be. So it's going to suck. You're not going to enjoy it, but just deal with it, because you can't change it. And a lot of social media. My wife loves to be on social media, and I'll be like, you got to stay off it. Like, you can't tell Carson that 16 people named John Smith and Joe Williams is like, oh, he needs to play more, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera, because they're not in the meetings, they're not at practice every day, and they're not putting their life on the line to try to get these kids going in the right direction. So,
Mark, I love everything you share. One thing you mentioned that I really like is how the kids, the reserves, the kids in the sidelines, I like how you reached out to those kids. Those kids may not ever be stars, they may not be, the top athletes, but you want to get those kids included, which I liked, so.
Well, sports just does so many great things for people. And again, I'm not trying to say, hey, everyone needs to be a star. All I'm trying to say is, like, you can gain so much from any organized sport. And I'm not saying it has to be football. Um, I've played games. I've been all over the world playing football. And if it wasn't for football, I wouldn't have done it. I played a game in Ireland, Tokyo, Japan, Mexico City. I played in all 32 NFL cities. I've interacted and met people all over the world that normally I wouldn't have, because of football. And I always look at it, it's still the same pure game that I played when I was a kid back in the little fields there in Aberdeen, Washington. It's the stakes have gotten bigger. Obviously there's a huge business and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. But if you really care about it and you really do it the right way, you can develop relationships that you can have for a lifetime. I have relationships from my college teammates and my pro teammates that last a lifetime, and it's been really special. And it's all because of a brown oblong football, and like, special times, really special times.
Love it, love it, love it.
Yeah.
Mark, all right. I've asked these two questions to about every guest the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and I always get amazing answers. Who is a living sports figure? Someone who's still with us today? It could be a player, a commissioner, a manager, a coach. Someone who survived, someone who's still with us that you'd love to have a conversation or interview. And who's a deceased sports figure in history you would have loved to have spent some time with?
Oh man, that's good. A current player, a current person, I should say. I've had a chance to have a lot of cool interactions with the Rooney family and the former Steelers. So, I'm going to go outside the box, and like, I would say, like, Franco Harris. There's a guy but I had a chance to interact with him. Joe Green, I worked with Joe Green, Mean Joe Green. Like these are people that I revered growing up, and now I had a chance to work with them. Paul Scanzi, like, I idolized growing up, and now I'm a scout. I get to be in a scouting room with him, so it's like, this is incredible. Chuck Knox would be somebody that I would really enjoy and want to talk to, because, like, he really was the coach for the Seattle Seahawks that for my childhood growing up, and kind of was like, man, like, that would be so neat to be a Seahawk. So, like, he kind of helped fuel my fire to be a professional football player. And obviously, had support with my family. I want to be really clear. But, like, because he was the head coach, I was like, man, I'd be kind of cool to see him and to interact with him. And so
he may be the deceased sports figure. Would be Chuck Knox. You'd love to spend time with, interact with.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And who'd be a living sports figure?
A living sports figure.
There's no wrong answer, by the way, Mark.
I know, but Julio Rodriguez, the baseball player for the Seattle Mariners.
Love it.
I'm impressed with him. And the reason why I'm impressed with him is because he acts and makes it look like he's playing Little League baseball out there. And I took my boys in another cool memory maker. We were at the All-Star game there because it was hosted here in Seattle.
Right.
And I think obviously got a single where he walked. I don't know. So he goes jogging out there to first base. And like I'm just watching his body mannerisms and the guy, I don't know what, he's 20 years old, maybe 21. Like he's young, but he was so giddy and like so like this is so cool. Like to me, like that would be kind of neat to talk to him. And my Spanish isn't very good, but I figured that we could get along and figure out a way to communicate back and forth. And I just like to see like what's inside his, like what's his motivation, like what's his day-to-day routine that he likes to do to keep himself young and keep himself excited. Because I really think that we have a Ken Griffey 2.0 type approach with this young man right here. I do. I really do.
I love that answer, Mark. You know who mentioned Julio Rodriguez? I was talking to Olivia, my producer and assistant here, and Olivia several weeks ago said Julio Rodriguez would be living sports figure she'd love to spend time with. So you and Olivia, producer
there
here.
we go. I'm glad that I'm up to her level is all I gotta say.
Absolutely. And I love how you threw in Chuck Knox, whose name had not come up. So
yeah.
So I don't want to digress too much, but I get great answers to that question. One guy, a local basketball coach, Rick Turner, he answered the living sports figure is that South African runner who got in trouble. He just loved to pick that guy's brain.
It started with a P. So he had double amputee.
Pistorius, I think.
Yes.
Yeah,
but he was a double amputee.
Yeah. So the answers I get are always interesting.
Yeah.
Of course, Michael Jordan's come up and LeBron, but it's interesting to get some people a little outside the box. All right, Mark, you were a long time NFL tight end. Who's your favorite tight end in NFL history, other than Mark Bruener?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of them. Kellen Winslow Sr., Dave Casper, Jay Novacek. Respect the heck out of Jason Witten, George Kittle. Travis Kelce, I love the way he plays. I really enjoyed the way Gronkowski played. In today's game, the tight end is morphed to a receiving type tight end, but the Gronks, the Kittles, the Wittens, and the Kelseys, they create such an unusual mismatches and advantages towards the quarterback and the offensive play caller that it's pretty amazing what they can do. And you see the creativity that Kyle Shanahan has in San Francisco and that Andy Reid has in Kansas City with what they're able to do with those two types of players, and what Dallas had when Aikman and Novacek was this security blanket. And Kellen Winslow down with the Chargers back in the day growing up, and the position has morphed to what they're able to do and what they're asked to do. And it's pretty special what those current players can do and how they can change the offenses. And San Francisco's in the championship game, and so is Kansas City. So that might tell you something.
Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez, John Mackey, Mike Ditka, so many famous tight ends.
Yeah, very much so.
Pick one though. I'm gonna put you on the spot, Mark. Pick one.
Oh, pick one. Okay.
Yeah.
Dave Casper.
Great name. Yeah.
Raiders.
It was a Raider for some of the listeners.
Notre Dame, I think is where he went to college, if I recall, and then Raiders. Yeah.
Great player. Mark, you were known as a blocking tight end in your college NFL playing days, although you had some receptions as well. Is there any side of you, Mark, that wishes you got some more passes thrown at you during your college NFL career?
We had such an amazing running game at the time. Jerome Bettis was our featured back, and one of my favorite teammates of all time, by the way. I had a lot of favorite teammates or great teammates, but Jerome continually comes up, and Hines are two people in particular that I would definitely put in that Mount Rushmore teammate type category. So for me, sure, it would be that'd be great to have more passes. I'm not trying to deny that in any way,
sure.
but like for me to be an integral cog in our offense, an integral part of getting Jerome, like when we rushed for over 100 yards, like like our percentage of winning was very, very strong. So like my theory is, hey, this is what they're asking me to do. Let's go out and do the best thing that I can. And I enjoyed more than ever to just frustrate the heck out of those defensive ends and outside linebackers that I faced. And for them, if they're worried about me and not the ball carrier, then I'm doing my job. Yeah, that would have been cool, but I don't regret anything that I did with any of the years that I played. I want to be really honest on that one.
You helped the teams win with what you were assigned to do. I like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah.
All right. Favorite sports movie?
Favorite sports movie? Oh gosh, Blindside one to come up. Field of Dreams is another one that I really can look upon and say that's pretty cool. Yeah, those are two that come to my mind right now.
I've asked this question to a couple of guests. I'm going to ask you this question. Any Given Sunday with Al Pacino came out in 1999. Did you think that movie was a pretty good, accurate take on football in the late 90s?
I mean, it was Hollywooded up, but like some of the things, like when you interacting with the owner and he showed his goof, like, hey, this is my team. Don't tell me what to do type stuff like that. I think back then you can get away with it. People are more professional now in that regard. So yeah, I enjoyed that movie. I did, and I thought Pacino did a good job.
The Miami Sharks, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. I like that movie, but I think I asked Ed Cunningham that question: how realistic was Sunday? So, and Ed's making movies now. I think I think he's in the movie business. So.
That guy's into everything. I'm so amazed at him. He's an impressive human being. Very impressive human being.
Definitely nice guy. Mark, you played in a Super Bowl. I think was it your rookie year or your second year?
First year. My first year we played the Dallas Cowboys.
Former teammate Eric Bjornsson, who played for the Cowboys. Yeah. Share us a memory of that game.
Oh gosh, the lights, the camera, like we played in some amazing games. Like the playoff games in Pittsburgh and everything were incredible. But down there in Arizona, and just the magnitude of that game, it was like, the smoke and the pregame and the announcements, like it was to the nth degree. And that's back in 1995. I mean, now it's amazing compared to that, what it is now. But holy cow, Paul, that was wow. And Leon Lett was one of the players, the Dallas Cowboys that I had faced. And Larry Brown had 2 interceptions in that game. And seeing Jay Novacek and Aikman, it was a special game as far as just being a part of it. Granted, we lost, and I was really bummed about that. But like looking back, I was like, man, I played in the Super Bowl. Like that was incredible. Yeah, incredible.
What was it kind of odd playing against former teammates like Bjornsson, just in general? Was that always a little odd, or just all business?
Not really, because we didn't face each other per se. You know what I'm saying? He was on offense, I was on offense, so I didn't like face him one-on-one. Sure. So that wasn't all that, unusual.
Yeah, gotcha. That's really neat. I mean, so not a lot of NFL players had the experience playing a Super Bowl. I mean, I don't think Dan Marino ever made a Super Bowl, right? I mean, there's some.
I think you're right. No, yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, and he's a Hall of Famer. And,
yeah, exactly.
He never made a Super Bowl. Yeah.
You mentioned playing with Jerome Bettis. You kind of maybe read a question I was going to have. You also play with some other famous players, I believe, like Hines Ward and Cordell Stewart. You were coached by Bill Cowher. Can you just share a couple memories of a couple of those guys, or any insights for the fans?
Hines was one of the toughest players I've ever played with. Jerome along those exact same lines. For someone of Jerome's size, he had the most incredible feet as far as nimbleness for a big back that he was. Cordell Stewart, just a pure athlete. We started out as a slash role with a quarterback receiver. Levon Kirkland was a linebacker that we played. Was a teammate. Greg Lloyd and Kevin Green were two amazing players that I played with. Carnell Lake. Over the years, there was a lot of amazing players that I played with, and very, very fortunate, Paul.
Neat, really famous sports. You were happy Cowher made the Hall of Fame?
Very much so. It couldn't have been more deserving for him. The thing that was impressive to me is Coach Cowher knew which hot button each player had. So that's an uncanny ability and an innate skill for him, for a coach to know because there's a lot of players, and for him to find a way to touch everyone in the right way and get them motivated, to me is unique in a good way.
I think Mike Holmgren has a good Hall of Fame case.
Yes, Oh, by all means. Yeah, yeah.
When Cowher got in, I heard some armchair fans, suggest, well, if Cowher's in, Holmgren should be in. I kind of heard, some arguments, but
Yeah, yeah, but no, I agree. I agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, what are some differences in the organizations when you played for the Steelers and the Texans? How are they different, the organizations? And I know the Steelers had a little bit better record when you were with them versus the Texans, but how are the franchises different when you played?
Well, as we alluded to, the Rooney family and the Steel organization, that it's a family-run business, and the Houston Texans, Mr. McNair was the founder of that organization, and it was more of a corporate type atmosphere, and loved it both sides, loved both organizations, but it just the family run organization. And then I was also there for a long time, and it was also more established. I was there year two through year seven of the Texans organization, so they were still trying to understand how they wanted to run things. Not that it was wrong or right; it was just they were understanding how they wanted to run things. So both organizations, I was extremely proud and pleased that I was able to work for them, and then now I still get to work for the Steelers in my current
I'm going to ask
capacity.
about your scouting experience
Yeah.
that you're doing now in a minute, but I want to back up for a minute. What is a first of all, who you're going to predict in the Super Bowl this year? I want to know who you're rooting for and who you're going to predict. And what is a Bruner family Super Bowl party like? Tell us about that.
Oh gosh, yeah. My prediction, I think it's going to be San Francisco and Baltimore for the Super Bowl, and Bruner family. One thing that you do, like when you go to some parties or some events, people kind of watch the game, but they really don't watch the game.
Right.
At our house, you're watching the game.
I bet.
So we get our food ready, we get everything ready, but it's a social event, but it's not like this, like whatever, like, oh yeah, the game's going on over here, and we'll just continue to talk. Like we're focused and we're dialed in. So that's that. So when you want to come to a Super Bowl party or a sports watching party at the Bruner household, get there early so you can talk and chatter. But then once the game starts, let's get our game face on.
You're studying it, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a little about your scouting work. And I had on a guest on my show, not the tight end Greg Olson, the longtime NFL assistant Greg Olson. And Greg was the Seahawks quarterbacks coach this season. Great guy. We become friends as well. Greg has shared with me, and he said this when he was on my show, that it's really tough to pick a good quarterback. That most of the quarterbacks picked, they can be amazing college players, but the NFL is just another level. Greg mentioned that it's hard to pick a good quarterback. Do you find that with other positions too, Mark? Trying to pick okay.
Offensive linemen now are really difficult because rarely will you see a guy in a 3-point stance. The college game has become such a lateral passing game that they don't need to hold their blocks very long. So it's offensive linemen are really tough. Receivers, either can you catch the ball and get open or not. Like that's not all that hard. Interior defensive linemen. I'm not talking about the edge rushers, the folks that are on the outside as much as the interior defensive linemen, the Cortez Kennedys. It's tough to find those guys anymore because the ball is out so much quicker, and defenses are in 60-65% sub, not their base fronts. So those type of guys are kind of tough. The fullbacks are becoming extinct. The two back offenses are not as prevalent anymore. So finding those type of guys is kind of tough. It really is.
Kickers and punters are a little less complicated, right?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Hey, can you kick it through the upright? Now, I will say that we try to, like with kickers and punters, at least for us, I want to see them if they've been exposed to cold weather, cold temperature. Because if you're a Florida kicker, for instance, I'm just making this up, and you've never experienced any cold weather or seen snow before, that could be pretty traumatic for someone like you. Not you personally, but for someone like that player. Quarterbacks, I like to see them throw in adverse situations because, again, you're in Los Angeles or Arizona, or you're not going to see a lot of cold weather games unless granted, maybe you're going to play in the Apple Cup if you're in the Pac-12. But really, you got to kind of hunt and pack and try to be selective when you're looking at some of these guys to see if they're going to be playing that like elements to what they're going to be with us.
Now, Mark, as a Steelers scout, are you traveling around the country a lot, or is it more of a virtual thing these days? We're watching a lot of videos. Tell me about, kind of your work.
It's more regional. It's more regional, but we usually are defined by areas. And for the last 11 or 12 years, I have been in the West Coast primarily, Mountain West, Pac-12. I'll do parts of Texas at times, but no, I've really enjoyed working for the organization. And we scout anybody. We're not just position specific. We go into a school and we might look at a kicker, a defensive tackle, and a quarterback, or it's really whoever they recommend. We try to find Steeler type players for us.
Mark, I want to ask this question, and I remember years ago, and not to pick on Ryan Leaf. I mean, he's definitely a changed guy, but years ago, I read there was some sports psychologists, one or two, that were advising the Chargers not to pick Ryan Leaf. They thought that Ryan Leaf psychologically just had a lot of issues at that point in his life. Did you guys, do psychologists play a role in a lot of this stuff and deciding who to draft and stuff?
We do a full comprehensive analysis on these players, and we go from the medical to the mental to the physical to when they meet Mr. Rooney. That's my litmus test. My litmus test is, if I introduce this player to Mr. Rooney, is he going to walk away like, wow, that was a nice young man? Or, wow, I don't really care if I meet him or talk to him again. Because I want to bring in Steeler type players that are going to represent our organization in the right way, represent in the right way in the community, represent the organization the right way on the football field, and also in the locker room. Because you need those components to be the right type of person that's going to fit in our organization and help us win. So we do a full comprehensive analysis on these guys, and there might be every team does it differently. There might be more psychological with team A than in team B, but a lot of times we just go with our gut feeling. Like after you interact and you meet the guy, and you're like, I don't know if that's going to work or not. And
I wasn't trying to pick on Ryan Leaf. I just wanted
no. I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
of what,
well, he came out in the Peyton Manning draft. So the Colts picked Manning and Chargers picked Leaf. And from what I was told, the Colts were really seesawing back and forth. Like one day, okay, we're going with Leaf, and then next day, oh my gosh, we're going to go with Manning, and then the next day, no, we're back with Leaf, and then we're back with Manning. So like it's a very subjective decision that you're making. And
I mean, the brain, these kids, 21, 22 years old, 23 years old, the brain is still developing. I mean,
agreed.
So, I thought I knew everything at 21, 22, but your brain is still developing.
We all did. Right. We all did. Yeah.
Mark, I may ask about one more subject, and I'll let you go. I know you're involved in NFL Players Union, and I could probably ask you tons of questions. I actually in college did a paper on the Major League Baseball Players Association. What do you think of improving the pensions? What is it, 3.5 years a guy becomes pension eligible? What do you think about making it maybe 1 year a guy becomes pension eligible? Give me your take on that particular subject.
I'm in full agreement of whatever benefits you can provide the players to the maximum ability you can at any level. And I know the average career of an NFL player is 3.5 years. And to be fully vested in all of the vehicles for the National Football League, all the vehicles, is 5 years.
Okay.
Now, in different stages. So like your severance is year 2, your 401k is year 2, and then you have your second annuity and different things, and then your medical finally kicks in. And but they do an amazing job. What was the salary cap? I want to say it was $280 million this past year, if I recall, per team. I can't remember exactly what it was, but a large portion of that, of I want to say almost 20 million, was for the benefits for the players. And I'm 100% in favor of finding ways to help benefit the players. Your life and your body is permanently altered from playing this game, and it's a choice that we make to play. I want to be really clear. It's not like they're forcing us to play. It's a choice that we make to play, and we're compensated and rewarded very, very highly for it. But if there's a way to just continue, helping players both medically and with their transition into the real world after football, I'm 100% in favor of that. And I know Pete Carroll, in kind of his retirement type speech and comments that he made when he had his press conference, he talked about trying to celebrate the former players, and he hopes that the NFL would do a better job of celebrating the former players. And I am in firm agreement with that, because like I believe that we should honor those before us, because they made what the path that we're walking on currently better and smoother. And we should try to leave that path better for the players behind us. And a lot of people do that, and a lot of people care about that, and some people don't. But if you can find a way to give more benefits to the players, longer health care, like we have if once you're fully vested, you have 5 years of health care for your family when you're done playing, then that's it. So let's find a way to create more health care for like something tangible, the players are going to need. If you just give them another $100,000 or another $500,000, well, that can be maybe misused or spent in the wrong way where it might not benefit them in the right way. But if you can kind of put some bumpers up and say, look, this is something that you're going to need. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You're going to be medical. Let's find a way to try to encourage that and talk about that and celebrate these former players and treat them the right way.
And Mark, not to digress too much, but kind of related, I'm a believer that workers' compensation laws should apply to college athletics. If a guy becomes permanently injured while playing college sports, let's protect that man or woman a little more. So
I agree. And we as NFL players, we play in obviously multiple states throughout the country, and different states have different workman's comp laws and rules. And it's challenging for players, because if a player gets hurt, like in the state of California, playing the LA Rams or the LA Chargers, they have different stipulations than if someone plays against the Green Bay Packers. And I'm not saying that any state is wrong or right for whatever laws they have passed, but maybe just find a way to have a uniform coverage for those types of players.
Great points. Hadn't quite thought of that perspective.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, you've been so generous with your time. I'm just going to wrap it up now. I want to wrap it up by you have anything else you want to share before we conclude the interview? I like to do that in a lot of interviews, kind of maybe something I missed that interests you. And what's in the future for Mark Bruener and your family?
Paul, I appreciate you inviting me on first and foremost. I want to make sure that I make that comment. And it's nice that we can find a way to reconnect. And
no doubt.
As we talked about what sports does, what it did for me, and because of sports, I mean, granted, we're talking about football, but you've talked to numerous sports folks about numerous sports, baseball, hockey, basketball, whatever it might be. And like, to me, that common thread to find a way to connect with somebody, I think is awesome. And
no doubt.
For you to be doing this podcast and invite me on, I feel extremely honored. I really do.
Mark, I'm honored you would come on. I really appreciate it. So it's great to catch up again after so many years. And what is in the future for you and your family?
So, we have 5 amazing kids. 2 daughters have already graduated from the University of Washington. Our 2 sons are currently there. Carson will be graduating this June, and then Braden is a sophomore there. And then we have a sixth grader, 12-year-old, who's probably going to be the best rock star of the whole group. And then we have 2 foster sons that are with us as well. And we're just so blessed to be able to provide some love and nurturing for those 2 amazing boys. And what's next for us is to continue to enjoy our family. Obviously, help our sons through this transition with the new football staff, and as we migrate through the winter and into the spring. And for me, it's starting to ramp up a little bit, and for my wife, it's starting to ramp up a little bit as well with her cheer competition season coming up, and then my draft preparation. I'll be leaving tomorrow actually for an All-Star game in Dallas, and then we start ramping things up. So it'll be exciting times for us in this spring.
Well, great, Mark. Great. Good luck with your wife and your kids. And I look forward to watching your sons play for the UW in the fall of 24. So lot ahead. And Mark, thanks so much for doing this. Let's you and I stay in better touch.